Think of one of the hardest cases you've had to work with.
It's really hard to say, well, your problem is worse than her problem.
What is the government doing?
Social services came into the house to see the conditions they were living in, and they found out the small children, the ones that were still crawling, they had mice eating their fingers or ears because of how dirty the house was.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Compassiviste Dialogues, the podcast exploring social activism, environmental responsibilities, and the intersection of privilege. This is hosted by myself, Ali Horiat. And first of all, I'd like to thank everybody joining. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our special guest today, Juliana Soria, who is an advocate, a lawyer out of Brazil. And her work is about empowering women with knowledge. Juliana, do you want to tell me a little about yourself?
Hi, first of all, thank you for having me here. Really excited. Well, so right now I've been working again in Brazil for about 4 years as a lawyer, and I have a bit of experience working abroad as well, in Europe, but I decided to bring that back home again so I can actually work, in my own backyard. So what I do is I work with a lot of people from low income backgrounds. And once I started realizing what was missing, I decided to turn a bit of my practice into something that I can give back. So I'm able to help women realize the really basic things that some of us may think it's obvious, but sometimes it's not. So helping them realize what they should know and what they can do if they want to leave an abusive relationship, because that is really important and a lot of us take that for granted.
Okay. And tell me what brings you to this space. I mean, as a practicing lawyer, you could have been dealing with property, you could have been a litigation lawyer, you could have been any kind of lawyer. What is it that drove you? What personal or professional experience drove you here?
So my background since college actually was a lot to do with commercial law. So I worked with companies and big law firms for a very long time. Even when I was living abroad, I was working with huge cases, arbitration cases, and I decided I didn't want to do that anymore because that was not making me happy and was not making a difference. I couldn't actually help anyone. So I decided I wanted to be more 101 situation lawyer. I wanted to see the person that I was helping. I wanted to see um, if I won a cause, I wanted to be able to tell my client or the person that I was helping what actually happened, and not just talking to a bunch of lawyers and have huge meetings and just taking 1 million from one company and throwing to another company. So that was just a bit too much for me, and I decided to make that change, and it's very rewarding. It's a lot of information sometimes because you're dealing with people's lives, but it's really rewarding. I enjoy it.
Okay. And if I were to ask you about what you do in terms of supporting people's, especially women's legal rights and rights to property ownership and property in general, and how this can be the critical move for women to free themselves from abuse, where would you start this conversation in terms of what would be the primary aspects?
Okay, so first, what happened was I started to work with people from low income areas and I started making accessible prices for litigation. So women can get custody of their children, can get alimony, where sometimes that is not the case because they just don't have anywhere to go, let alone get their rights. So I started that, and then one thing, goes to another, and then those women started to tell their friends, and oh, I have this lawyer and she does really accessible prices, like really, really accessible prices.
Mm.
Not when it started, like it wasn't pro bono because I could not start with that.
Hmm.
But and then it started, they started coming, in numbers. So I
Right.
saw a possibility of actually doing something with that. So, and then starts the hard part where me, as one person, I can't actually help everyone because I also, you have the budget limitations and you also have
True.
time limitations as one person. And right now I have one intern in my law firm that actually does just that,
Hmm.
but you have all these limitations. So you start getting a lot of requests from women that are just awful stories and you want to help them all. So the ones that I choose to help legally and I donate my time, those are just a small bit. And the other ones where I just can't find the time, I just sometimes I can refer them to a couple of friends, lawyer friends of mine that would actually do something similar. But other times I just, engage them with conversation and tell them the really basic. So, are you married on paper? Do you have those certificates? Because a lot of times women, they just don't know if they're even married legally. They just think that because they're moving in together is the same and they have the same rights. So you have to start conversation from the really basics. And then those women that I can't donate my time to actually take their lawsuit on, it goes on to talking about what they can do to try to get out of the situation or just get more informed, get them to the public defender's office and with the right sorts of documents. And so you can do that job by just getting them aware of where they can start because they don't know where to start sometimes, where to get the right documents, all that.
With what you said, I want to also touch a little bit on the historic issue here, because from my travels and from observing different cultures, I know that this issue is highlighted in much of the world. It is in Brazil, it is in other parts, it is in Canada, it is in some parts of Africa that I've seen, some parts of Asia. Um, there are a lot of lawyers trying to address family issues, women's rights pertaining to family issues and disputes and abuse. So, give us a little intro on the Brazilian perspective of cultural norms and even systemic barriers that produce the inequality in a sense, or sustain it, or maintain it, or encourage it, and restrict people that you're trying to help, because you're really trying to help the underprivileged here. You're not the divorce lawyer for the celebrities of Brazil. You
Yeah.
are the lawyer protecting the women who are unprotected, essentially. So, how does the Brazilian culture support this?
I would say that most of the women that I get the chance of being in touch with, it has to do a lot with sometimes what society feels like very patriarchal society. So um, it's
Mm.
very common for these women to be sometimes very trustworthy of their partners, in which I can understand. I mean, you're in the beginning of a relationship and everything is just amazing. But you should just be bare minimum of like keep a copy of your documents, just know what you're doing. Sometimes like especially in low income areas, you'd have these trust issues where is if your male partner, they want you to give up your job so you can be a stay at home mom or even just a wife. A lot of women do let go of their financial source income, which is a huge detriment on how they can sometimes move on and get out of a relationship or a situation with children that they want to leave the house that they can. So I'd say inequality starts with the way society still gives women the job of staying at home, and how sometimes in lower income areas you'd see that as a requirement, as you'd
Mhm.
stay at home and that's your job. And it's also it's also a way for husbands to manipulate the women into staying and doing what they want, because if the women have no alternative. They have nowhere to go. They don't have their documents. They don't know if they're married or not because they just signed a paper that your husband told you to sign. Then they can't leave
Mhm.
because you do need the minimum to work with. So I'd say uh, it's still a lot of what society expects of women, to be stay-at-home partners sometimes, and that trust that sometimes flows from women to men, but not the other way around.
Right. And so this archaic mentality is prevalent in Brazil, and
Yeah.
you see it functioning.
Because that's because of education. We still have a lot of issues with basic education, and
Mhm.
once you are educated and you have access to education, that that's something you shouldn't do. That you have the minimum interest of what you should do, and you're supposed to earn your own income and all of that. You can be more independent, but because a lot of people still don't have access to that basic education, it all stems from that. So if you don't have the education, how are you supposed to know that you can do any differently? You don't. So
True.
it goes from education, lack of it, and no financial education whatsoever. That's a huge problem here, and I suppose in a lot of countries, but speaking from a Brazilian perspective, no basic education whatsoever, no financial education, and also a lot of what society still expects from women, that they're more homebound.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from you is culture plays a big role, and however, on the other hand, I'm also hearing that there's a systemic issue which is not necessarily cultural. I mean, when you talk about education and the lack of equitable access to education, this is a legal issue. This is not necessarily a cultural bias. What is the government doing? I mean, if a lawyer such as yourself is recognizing this, I'm pretty sure at the higher levels of the Ministry of Education and other spaces, they must be throwing these ideas around that this is happening.
Yes, but at least from my point of view, the way that education is still addressed here in Brazil, because it's a country of continental proportions, so we have to take that into consideration, especially when we compare it to other countries which are not that do not have that proportion. So from what I see, the government does tackle the financial issues and education even from um, when you're older. So you have like quotas for people from low income backgrounds and racial quotas for getting to college sometimes. You do have for public jobs, you do have that quota. And then you have government funding for families that make above the poverty line, when family have more than minimum wage. So you do have those aids from government, but it's only when you're already older. You do not see a lot of programs tackling education from the very beginning, and
Mhm.
that would be ideal. But that's because you won't see the results until way later when it's probably not you're not in government anymore, so it's harder to have people invest in education from a very early start because results come much later. And when you give someone that's older, even a woman that it's in trouble, when someone's that doesn't have minimum wage and they get a small allowance from the government because they have children, for example, then you can see the results immediately. You have a vote, so it's easier and more immediate to act that way. So it should be more of a combined effort.
Right. And I'm hoping that the change in your government structure right now, recently, will reflect some of these things because on the climate front, recently there was news that the Amazon is, the deforestation is reduced significantly by over a third. And there are plans for educational reforms and other things like that. So hopefully those things get better addressed. But I completely understand what you're saying, and it's not a Brazilian issue. Some of the issues you raise, um, You may see them from your perspective in Brazil, but in a lot of the world, one of the problems we face is governments are elected for short terms, and they want to make decisions and choices that reflect short term results in order to either become reelected or benefit from the short term that they're in office. And so that's a capitalist issue,
Yeah.
which we will leave for another space and another time.
Yeah,
But
I think it's a
right,
bigger issue, but yeah,
it's a much bigger
hopefully
issue.
with
That's politics.
yeah,
And I
exactly.
know Brazilians love to talk politics, but I'm not going to get into
No,
that.
no, I'm not in that case. No, it's just like an issue that you see here as well. But I mean,
Yes.
part of what I do and what I try to do is actually bring a bit of what we can do locally, which I think it's
Mhm.
huge. And if it's
Of
really like
course.
if everyone did a little bit of what they
Mhm.
can, you already can see a huge change because I alone or you alone cannot affect, policy and everything that goes into the big thinking and education policy and everything, climate action. So it's really hard to one
Mhm.
person to affect that all. So I suppose with what a lot of us, ordinary people are trying to do when we decide to engage with something is just do our little bit. So I suppose that it's really important and it deserves the conversation. Why I think this podcast is really interesting because sometimes you cannot engage in a huge level. You have to try to do what you can, and that is enough,
Right.
So for your area, so you can already improve the lives of people around you. And that's really good.
Mm-hmm. It's very true. And I'll add one little thing to what you said. You started by saying you alone can't make a difference. I alone can't make a difference. But I try to do my bit. You try to do your bit. And I think the reason why us trying to do our bits separately isn't working to the extent that we would like to see the world shift towards is because we are still doing our bits separated.
Yeah.
My goal here through Compassiviste is to connect the bits. When you connect the bits, it creates a force that can make the difference. And I think that is the point of having this dialogue, essentially, to see how we can come together and support what you're doing on a greater level with more exposure so that instead of having you and one intern missing lunch or dinners so that you can help other women, we can flood you with the resources that allow you to, have a whole building of people supporting people. So that's the point of this. And having said that, it takes us straight into the next issue, which is essentially what are the hurdles you face? I want you to tell us why you struggle through this and how you navigate with your team through the issues that you're seeing in women's rights, and you're seeing also through social and environmental limits or inequalities that affect this. Because I suppose the people you try to help, as you said, women who cannot fend for themselves, who don't know where to sleep that night if they leave an abusive relationship, even, they're not thinking of recycling.
No.
So where do all the hurdles come for Juliana and her team?
Well, from a legal perspective, first, I suppose when you actually, first of all, actually, before the legal part, since it grew, our network, and we became known to be like a small community that can come to us and try to figure out their problems. The first issue is actually try to figure out who to help because it's really hard to say, well, your problem is worse than her problem. So who am I to
Mm,
say, which one deserves more? But that's a filter we have to do, because if I get 3 to 4 women a day at the moment contacting me through my email saying that they need to leave or they need to get custody of their children or everything like that, or the father has gone missing and they don't receive any financial aid from him, who am I to say which one deserves most? So that is the first hurdle, trying to filter which person I can help. At this point, I can focus on picking up 1 to 2 new cases a week. So that is my topmost, because it's not just saying, okay, I'm going to help you, and that just ends there. I have to navigate that person towards helping
Hmm.
me get the documents I need, the bare minimum, which is to figure out if they're actually married. That is something that at first, when I started working with people and not companies, I was, how do you not know that you're married or not? Like, isn't that basic? So it's not, because here you have, you can be married, actually marriage on paper, and you can have what we call like a civil union, which is also something you
Hmm.
do on paper. Or if you're just, bundled up together for at least a couple of years with a couple of prerequisites, even if you don't have anything on paper, you can also state that you have a civil union. So that, implies a lot of legal stuff. So first you have to find out which of the three you're dealing with, and which is in fact a hurdle, because sometimes they don't know what they signed. They don't remember where they signed. So you can go to a public notary and ask for a copy. So you go through all that. And then you have to get, children's birth certificates, which sometimes, most of the times, they don't have a copy. You need to help them do that. And you need to sometimes find them places to stay. So if they're really living, and then you need to contact public organizations that deal with abusive relationship, and especially children in abusive homes, to actually go
Hmm.
investigate that. So you have a lot of things that go around helping one person. And then after
Okay, I'm
helping,
gonna interject. No, no. Before you go into the next hurdle, I want to ask two questions. First, what time frame are you talking about getting all these documents? Because as you speak, you're speaking about cases, and a lot of people may forget that there is a woman being abused, trying to leave, or being in a frightened situation, or having her and her children not be able to provide for themselves, who are living through this stage as you are trying to find out where the birth certificate is or to apply for a new one.
so we, well, to get all these documents, usually, or just to try to find out something that will hold up in court, even like
Hmm.
what they're doing and what their situation is, it will take about 5 days to 7 days, like a week, before, like, so if that person can wait where they are, great. If not, sometimes it's like, at least what we have to have is the birth certificate of the child, and that is something that we can get in like 2 to 3 days depending on where they live. So you have to tell, like, are you in danger, what's happening, if your husband has a gun, if anything like that. So it's really important to figure out what the
Hmm.
situation is, and it's really a case by case situation. So sometimes they
Right.
say, no, I can go to a friend of mine, I can go to my mom's, or because sometimes the
Yes.
family does not know what's happening, or I can leave for today, but then tomorrow I don't know. So it will really depend on how, but like, to in between uh, getting in touch with that person and filing the lawsuit, we usually take about a week. So, for example, the couple of cases that I took on this week, they will be probably filed on by Friday next week. So that's
Mm.
how we deal. But now they are piling up, because you like, it's 2 weeks, so they pile up,
Right.
so you have
Right.
all of that. And really, the environmental part is just as you mentioned. You can't ask, oh, so are your children eating, healthy food, or are they eating processed food, so as
Hmm.
long as they're eating something, that's great. So you can
As long
actually,
as they're alive.
yeah, they're alive. Are they ate today? They have, okay, that's great. You don't want to go, oh, are they eating their vegetables? Are they eating
Hmm.
fruit?
Hmm.
Are you throwing your plastic in the right bin? So it
Right.
really it's really out of touch sometimes if we try to
Hmm.
ask even what kind of food they're eating. We just want to know that they're
Hmm.
fed and they're right.
Yeah, I
'Cause
really wanted to, interject because I wanted to bring this up from a humanitarian perspective. A lot of times when I hear or watch or read about, lawyers discussing legal issues, they become so intertwined in the law and the process that they forget sometimes that there is a life behind what is happening. So when I listen to you speaking, I'm hearing, potentially a long period, which I was thinking a week or 2 weeks for this to take place. And we're talking about a person who may not be able to have any solutions for that period of time, and hopefully maybe even have solutions after going to court or even after meeting you, which is also not guaranteed. So it's a very difficult space to be working in. And in terms of a resolution, before we go into your next hurdle, what would be the solution for you here? I mean, one which would come straight to my mind is, well, if you had the right amount of funding, you would be able to support uh, people you take on more cases, expedite them so that instead of 7 days or 2 weeks, they're done in 3 days, for example. So funding plays a major role, obviously. So I'm
Yeah.
not going to ask you to say that again, but is there any other way that you can think of that you can say, well, if I had this or if I had that, it would help?
I think at this point, like if I actually had, because everything takes time, right? So, and not just time in a going, it takes your time. And
Hmm.
I think if we can get like a page, because here people still use a lot of Facebook and stuff. So if you can do like not precisely like uh paid like you know paid marketing on the internet, but if you could like get word out there and perhaps get like free events, online to get to more women. So they be like, they don't actually get to that awful situation in the first place. So are you a,
Hmm.
are you a young woman? Are you like, even if you're not from a low income background, but are you from are you getting married? Do you have a partner? Do you know what your rights are? Do you know what types of documents you need to keep? So even if you could like reach more people to get like free seminars and get free talks online, and even eventually like reaching out to some communities in person, that would be great,
Hmm.
because you're kind of trying to prevent them from getting to me when situation is bad. So I think that would be a huge thing, just prevention wise. If they know how to behave in the first place, then perhaps they have a chance of not ending up trying to email me to get their case on.
Correct.
So I think that,
Okay.
but I don't have the time to get on social media and
That's but
so
but that's fine.
yeah.
That's why we're having this conversation. So humanitarian issues are important to me. So what we're going to do is we're going to team up to resolve this first hurdle. What we'll do is, I have no Portuguese background, so I will be useless in English to your community. But you will find time, or you'll have someone in your team find time to maybe create the content that you want to share with
Yeah,
your community or people. What my team and myself will do is develop that into what you want it to be
yeah, that'd be
and push
amazing.
it out there. And as we do that through the foundation, through Compassiviste Foundation, we will put this out there as a cause to champion you and to support you so that you can help more people, because this is what it's about. It's about you doing you, me doing me, but not separately, not you in Rio and me wherever else in the world, but to actually be able to come together. That's what technology is for, to bring us together. So we're going to come together and we're going to do that. So we're going to try and resolve this first hurdle by raising funds for you and by supporting you with social media and with Facebook and other ways to
That's amazing.
get the
Yeah.
message out there to prevent. So let's maybe we'll start this and we'll come back at another time again and talk to each other and say, hey, we resolved hurdle number one. So
Yeah,
what's
it's
hurdle number
great.
two?
Yeah, I'm a great. Well, that's just great to hear. I'm excited. I'll certainly find the time, skipping lunch and dinner and everything. So that's great.
We
Um,
all will, because
yeah,
it's lives of people,
I know. Yeah, it's really good when you can actually come
right?
together and help people. You get more. Well,
Yeah.
besides being very selfish and feeling our own sense of purpose, because we are able to
Yeah.
help. we get a sense that we're actually making the difference. And I think that that will, if people know what they're like, really, I keep saying that, but really the basic things, it's really amazing
Hmm.
because, as you said, when we're talking about sometimes, well, worrying about environment or trying to bring even those other issues with people that are facing such hardships, we're like, well, I
Hmm.
mean, we're so self-absorbed. And I think even with us, that we have that mentality that people are suffering and they have so much larger issues, we still don't know what they're living through. We still can have,
Hmm.
that's something that
Hmm.
being in touch with these people every day taught me, that I have, even if I'm in contact with these people every day, I don't know what they're going through. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. And nothing's, I mean, I won't say nothing because that's not a challenge, but a few things surprise me nowadays. So I'm never surprised when someone tells me an awful story of what's happening.
Hmm.
And
Unfortunately.
yeah, and that's something that it's going to be really good to come true, hopefully.
Hmm. Okay. And other hurdles you face in doing what you do.
Well, then I think suppose it will be time frames and actually, well, keeping in touch sometimes with people because you are dealing with someone that is not running away from someone sometimes, like they're just trying to keep alive and they're trying to
Hmm.
keep their children safe. So people here, at least, they change their contact numbers a lot. So it's really hard to keep them. You need to bring them up about a case, you need to talk to them about a hearing, and they change their number, and it's hard to. And I know the public defender's office here, they have the same problem. I mean, of course, me, I'm just really, I don't have, I'm not even comparable to the public defender's office, but they also have this problem of getting in touch with people sometimes because it's really hard. They're not thinking, well, my lawyer won't be able to contact me. They're just thinking, well, my partner's not going to be able to threaten me anymore, so I'm going to change my number. So,
Hmm.
uh, and then you have to try to reach them through email or figure out if you know someone that they know, and perhaps creating a community would be also easier to stay in touch.
And it's very sad because what you're talking about is not a separation or a breakup, or a person saying, I don't want to talk to my partner more, my partner may be annoying or something, I'm going to change my phone number because they're harassing me or sending me too many texts. You're talking about a person, generally a woman, um, who is scared, who fears for her life, for maybe her children's lives, that turns around and changes her information and hides until some due process, in court legally gives her some rights, by which even after they still fear some persecutions because
Yeah.
just having a piece of paper does not entail that this person is not going to attack you later.
Yeah, what they do sometimes with their piece of paper is that it ensures they get alimony for their children, and which is some financial assistance, and it
Hmm.
ensures that they can enroll their children in schools close or daycare close to where they're living at this point. If they need to change neighborhoods for with to live with their families, if they need to change neighborhoods because they're being threatened for work, for anything, they can enroll and take their children with them without being harassed or not being able to take the children with them because they actually have custody. So that's what usually helps them most, is then be able to relocate and do whatever it takes to
Right.
just live. And that is the most important, I
Fair enough.
suppose. Yeah, so that's what it
Now,
does.
okay. Now, in your first hurdle, which we're going to try to resolve with pamphlets or preventative measures that we can work on together to um, get to people, you speak a lot about education at the very early stages. So you're not talking about education, getting grants for your PhD. you're talking about grade 1, grade 5, those levels.
Yeah.
And I want you to speak a little bit about the implications and why you emphasize early education and how this helps to the growth of the person, so that I can tie this into another point when you're done explaining your part.
Okay. Well, once you're exposed to education from a really early age, I mean, you're more, once you're kept out of the streets where you might go into another direction in life, especially if you're a very low income family, once you have food in school, you don't have that worry for your parents. So it goes, everything goes beyond, I mean, the knowledge that you actually get in school. And then once you actually stay in school for as long as you need, you have more chance of actually getting to college. And here we have really good state and federal colleges, but
Mm-hmm.
ironically, because they're harder to get in because they're really good. Usually, people that have more financial conditions, they can only study, they can dedicate themselves to just getting the scores they need to get into those colleges. You have an imbalance there. So if you get people to actually stay in college, they in school, you can actually get them to good colleges and being financially independent. So that will give them more chances in life to not end up where their parents are, where they might have been if they didn't have the opportunity to be in school. So that goes for food, for worrying, for opportunities in life, and actually, getting a job eventually.
Okay. And I'm going to go on a little tangent here. Brazil is a highly artistic country. I mean, a lot of people in Brazil have a lot of talent. It is very, very talented. And I'm not just talking football, I'm talking a lot of different arts,
Yes.
music, dance, painting, everything. Um, do you also agree that some sort of education and funding into the arts specifically can support growth? Because when you visit Brazil, if for people who haven't, when you visit Brazil, you go into areas where the hotel says, "Don't go past this street. You shouldn't
Yeah.
be walking in this area," but you do, right? As soon as they tell you don't go there, that's where you go,
Yeah, but you
or
shouldn't.
at least that's where. Yeah,
You
but at least
shouldn't.
that's what I do. I go where I shouldn't,
Because
and I
then,
tell
if
people,
anything happens to tourists, then you get a bad
yeah,
impression that, well, tourists get
true,
whatever. So,
but
yeah.
right, and this may not be the right thing to say, but I go into the areas I have for many years, and I say, "I'm here. Don't kill me. I just want to know. I just want to learn. I just want to see. I just want to experience. I'm human. You're human. I just want to know what is happening." And most of the time, someone holds my hand and takes me through. And so that happened to me in one of the favelas in your city. And I went through. And when I went through, I was so impressed by some of the art with bare minimum. I'm talking bare minimum tools. The stuff that was created should be in galleries, and they're not. And
Yeah.
you have artists who are famous now who come from those areas, who got the opportunity somehow by sheer luck or some kind of coincidence that, it just so happened that they blew up and this happened. But generally, it's not the case. The grand majority don't make it out. So, do you think in a country as artistic as Brazil, as talented as Brazil, that there should be some kind of implementation of the arts and of other forms of education? Or is it really that desperate that we're talking about the most basic of necessities in education to get people past stage one?
I think both. So I don't think one excludes the other because you do have regions where you lack the basic. You don't, children just don't have the transportation to get to school, so they don't go. And
Right.
so we are talking about the basic, or sometimes children are not sent to school because they need to be working to help parents at home. So you
Hmm.
have that reality, which just it's impossible to ignore, and it's very basic. And you have also what you mentioned, which is regarding the arts, and that saves also and helps a lot of people, teenagers and children. Um, and we have a lot of projects here in Brazil that
Hmm.
connect children and teenagers to sports, to the arts, to everything, and those are amazing as well. They are one does not exclude the other. So I think this, if really well structured, because then you need people to be there. Usually it's a physical place, so you usually need that, and it's very interesting. We do have a lot of successful projects in Brazil regarding that.
And the reason I bring that up is I think with education, as you mentioned, we can also lift people into the sustainability space, whether nutritional or environmental, and we can include a lot of cultural and historic knowledge from Brazil, because you have an indigenous community that has a lot of resources, a lot of culture, a lot of history, a lot of knowledge. Just recently, um, well, around Brazil and Colombia, the plane crash with the little girl who saved her siblings and kept them alive. And we're talking, few months old children to young kids. And it was based on a lot of indigenous knowledge, not formal education of a school system, so to speak. And I think a lot of the indigenous communities live a sustainable life, not because they were taught by some university out of the United States about sustainability, but because it's common knowledge and it's something they've grown accustomed to, and there's respect and love for the environment, so they live that way. And I think through education and the arts, we can revive that connectivity between the indigenous arts community and environmentalism, which is embedded in the arts of the indigenous people, to the education, and make that transition to a global um, version of this, and especially to a national version of the Brazilian people. Because when you take that lifestyle and you push it into people's way of living, I think it makes a very big difference in the large communities in places like Rio or Sao Paulo, where, like you said, there is no discussion of sustainability or lifestyle or nutrition or anything like that, because people are just trying to make it to tomorrow morning. And so, this type of education that you're talking about and the advocacy for it is important, because it opens the door to that discussion. It opens the door to the second layer. And that's where the intersection of empowering women in places like what you are working with exactly, primarily, is important to be able to activate women to freedom, liberty, and to sustainability, because one leads into the other.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I don't agree that people come from privileged high towers and they start talking about sustainability issues to people who literally are changing phone numbers to run away from potential death, and it's not going to work. But if we were able to fix the first step of keeping them alive and giving them security and giving them health, then we can talk about sustainability.
Of course.
So
Yeah.
that's the flow that we both kind of lead into.
Yeah,
So
once
it's
you have food on your table, your children are safe, you have a job to go to, then you can start worrying if
mhm,
your children are eating more fruit and vegetable, and you're not buying super processed food with a lot of plastic.
yes,
So once you have the basic, you can start worrying about, of course, the environment should be basic too, because that's the earth we live in, and we only have one.
mhm,
But from what we're talking about, sure, once you have the basic things in your life and you don't have to use your energy and everything to go through those, you can start dedicating a part of your time to um, separate your garbage or do something else that works for sustainability.
right. And not that it's that big of an issue I also want to break this myth right here and the hypocrisy of environmentalism in this case. Um, this shouldn't be an issue in certain parts and regions of the world because the majority are not contributing to a detrimental level of a carbon footprint on a personal level or a family level that they should really make this a top priority in their lives. I've been to places, I've lived in places where, um, at worst, people in a month are maybe emitting what people in Toronto or London or New York are doing in less than a week. So
Yeah.
how much, how much effect is there for that? So that's another talk too. Now, I want to make this a little personal because I find when people connect and when people can relate and when people can have some kind of vicarious position in a story, they are more ignited or activated to react or even act. So, without sharing names, without telling me specifics of and details, think of one of the hardest cases you've had to work with so that people watching or listening can reflect and say, you know what, me being engaged with something like this is me saving a life. And I always try to tell people that. I always try to say, you being involved is not about a post or about the excitement you get, or even this concept of it'll make you feel happier to give. It shouldn't matter if it makes you happier to give. It should matter that you're giving for a reason. It should matter that you're giving to save someone, not because saving someone makes you happy at the end of the night, but because saving someone intrinsically should be your duty as a human. So tell me a story.
Okay, so I really um uh, the the toughest case, or shouldn't go that far, just to know my limits because you have a lot of stories.
There are no limits. Something that you feel that you would tell people, to tell them this is how harsh it is. This is what happens. This is,
Um,
I'll
okay.
tell you something. I spoke with somebody who is doing what you're doing, nearly what you're doing in another country, and I was shocked because they were crying, and I said, "What happened?" I thought something personal happened, and she said, "Oh, I had court for a client, and the clients, and then the coroner's office sent a note and said she's dead,
Oh,
and
yeah.
this is a person who was trying to get away, and I couldn't." With the court dates and all these things, I just couldn't. And this is what happened. All I had to do was bring her and put her in my house, and she would have been alive today. And she was blaming herself. But it's not really her fault, but this is the reality. This is truth.
Yeah, well, I suppose, yeah, that happened. That happened twice already, where I filed a lawsuit as a protective measure to secure a woman and her children. And before we actually had the hearing, uh, we got a report in the lawsuit that they both had been, one was missing and the other was found dead, and they were investigating the partner. And it does cross your mind, well, if I just had paid like for her to go away, but then you start, you have to, and I already did that, but then you start, well, if I start paying for everyone out of my pocket, it does become impossible. And but of course, awful beyond measure. I suppose when people ask me what is the one of the worst things that happened, I mean, this already happened 2 or 3 times. That so the part, it was a family of 5, and the other one was a family of 4. So a, a man, a wife, and 2 or 3 children, and they were living in a very very poor conditions. And the woman was trying to do some housework for neighbors to try to like bring some money into the house. So she wasn't around a lot because she was trying to make some money, and the husband is usually a drug addict or an alcoholic. And she's not being abused, but what happens is she leaves the children with him. And what happened was she found out that one of the children was being abused by the partner, sexually abused. And the other thing happened was that social services came into the house to see the conditions they were living in. and they found out that that happened in both houses. The small children, the ones that were still crawling, they had mice eating their fingers or ears because of how dirty the house was. So this was the condition that the children were living. So the state had to intervene to take the children away when it was just the mom that was trying to work outside to get to provide for her children because the dad was an alcoholic or a drug addict and was just abusing at home. So that was so seeing those children in that situation was one of the worst, like both things, one of the worst things that I've ever seen. And because I had to go bring social services to them, so I was riding along, and it was absolutely awful. And so that goes along with a couple of times where I had two mothers come into my law firm with their children, and they told me with the child there, it was one of the one was a girl that she was 2 years old. She was the cutest little thing, and the other one was a boy of around 4. And they came in and they told me they didn't want the children anymore. So you have to call in social services because you don't know like what's happening if they're going to abuse the child. So they said it was a really bad environment that they were for the children. They wanted to give the children up. They had many problems. They couldn't care for children at the moment. So that was very sad because the children were just there being adorable, and they were in this awful situation. So I suppose these are some stories that happen probably every day, but
Yes,
yeah.
unfortunately. Yeah, I don't know where to go from here, but yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's why I asked
uh,
about, you see, and
yes,
that's why I
no,
mentioned
no.
that.
You know what? It's painful, and I appreciate you sharing. But I think it's important that we share these stories. I think it's very important because we try to paint this picture of humanity around the world, and it isn't much like that. The reason why I ask about these stories and why I really want to get deep into human culture is I left a life of privilege, very, very high privilege. And when I thought I'm going to make a difference and I'm going to change and I'm going to do this for the world and I'm going to be Gandhi, I was hopping from, you know, Ritz Carlton to Ritz Carlton around the world, thinking I'm going to make a difference, sleeping in resorts.
Yeah.
And it only happened when I gave my privilege up. I handed back my privilege to society. And I said, here, you have my privilege, and I'm going to be without privilege, so to speak. Not that I'm underprivileged, but just without the privilege I had. I started living in those communities. I started noticing the issues that were happening that didn't happen before. And I started seeing hunger that I wouldn't see before. I started seeing poverty that I wouldn't see before. Because even when you travel, even in the poorest of countries, you could be in a nice resort and speak to the staff, and they're all smiling because they don't want to lose their job. They won't tell you about what's happening. But when you
Yes.
live in those places, right? So I want people to share those. That is what this is about. That's what Compassiviste is about. It's about the truth. It's
Yes.
about integrity, honesty, and
It's
and I appreciate you sharing.
it's just very different when you're in touch with people 101, and
Yes,
you come down from
yes,
your privilege, from our high
yes. You do
ground, and
exactly, exactly.
even with that, I like it always amazes me how we have no clue what these people are living through. So
Hmm.
that is just something that
Hmm.
I try to keep in my mind because I help them, but then I come after going with social services to retrieve a child that was being abused. I still come home to my house, to my family, to
To your
yeah,
safety.
to my safety, to my cushy house and warmth, and I don't have those
Hmm.
struggles at home. So even with that, so we don't have any idea of what they're going through, and so that's very
And
important.
there is,
Yeah, so you don't judge.
yes,
You can't
right,
judge.
and there's a point of gratitude there to say thank you for what I have and what I am able to escape. But I think more than gratitude, there is a point of duty, a communal duty. um, this communal duty was something that has historically appeared in the world. You go back thousands of years, and whether it's a fable or a truth, Moses felt dutiful towards people who were being enslaved, and he went and freed people, and so many people after that. You can Martin Luther King, so many people after that, they did that. And the condition and the honor of duty sometimes and often should be much more than that of gratitude, because gratitude is, to me, a cop out. I'm grateful for my high tower while people suffer. I, I don't know how grateful that gratefulness is, because I
Yes.
should feel more dutiful. So you're doing the duty, and that's why I appreciate you, and that's why I appreciate you being my friend, and that's why I appreciate knowing you and being able to work with you, because you are the hero. You are the
Well,
person who is
yeah.
who is no, you are. This isn't putting you on a pedestal. You are, because you could have continued your line of working in the corporate world in Rio and being on the other side of the city, and really mingling in those spaces, and that life. I've seen that part at Rio as well, and it's a very different world. It's a very different world. So you're not, though. You're choosing to be where people need you to be, and that is a compassivist. That is what a compassivist is. That is the definition of being a compassivist. So, I applaud you, and I hope we can come together and really support what you do, um, and to show people that sometimes we wish for the lottery so we can buy this really nice car or home, or whatever it is that we dream about sometimes. But really, I wish that there was a million people listening to us, so they can each say, here's my $10 worth of support, and together that could change half of Rio for you. You could have a lineup around the block of people that you can support every single day, and that is much more important than that house or that beautiful car or whatever it is people are dreaming of today. And so we're going to do that at Compassiviste Foundation. We're going to try to support you financially and through all of the social media stuff, and you're going to continue what you're doing, and you're not going to go do some bungee jumping or craziness that will end up putting you out of commission, so now we can't help you. You're going to stay
Yeah.
safe, and
Hopefully.
we're going to do this, and we're going to get somewhere good with all of this.
Well, yeah, I'm very excited actually. That's gonna be really good, and I do appreciate it. Hopefully, if everyone throws in their little bit, we can do a lot together. So here's to hoping
Yeah,
that,
definitely.
yeah, here,
Yes.
and we don't we can
Here's to
and here's to
hoping.
hoping that we have less stories that are so awful. So
Thank you, Juliana, for being on the show, and thank you for your
yeah.
insight and all the stories you shared and the work that you're doing, the humanitarian work that you're doing. I certainly appreciate what you do, and I'm really happy to be working with you and collaborating on this project of trying to get as many people into safe harbor as we can. Compassivis will be dedicating time and effort to your cause. So I hope to have you back here again and to share some stories that are less heartbreaking than the ones you shared today, um, with the impact that we can make through Compassiviste Foundation. Thank you for being here.
Yes, that's great. Thank you so much for having me.
And for everybody here, stay tuned. We're going to continue down this path of environmental and social and critical issues that are facing us today. I'm Ali Horia, Compassiviste, and hope to see you soon.